Welcome. I'm Charlene Garrett, and this is the Accidental Mentor podcast, where we talk about how mentoring, while intentional, can sometimes be accidental. This is episode 3 of a 5-hour conversation. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you can be up to date on every episode that comes out. In the last episode, we talked about finance and budgeting, and really about tithing and how that really changed Julie's life. In this episode, we're going to hear more about Julie's life and how she began to believe what God said about her. We also talk about the tensions that I had of when to help and problem solve and when to just encourage her to go to God and to solve her own problems or look outside of me for help. And we talk more about that tension and several others. You're going to want to listen in. So here's today's episode of The Accidental Mentor. When you're finding a church or a doctor or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah, other people tested it first. That's funny. Wow, it's been a lot of years. We've had some fun times. So we were together. So it's funny. We've talked about this 20-year friendship. And it was remarkably only about 3.5 years in the same town.
Yeah, that's actually true. Yeah.
Same metroplex. We didn't even live in the same town.
Sometimes the same country.
And, but yet sometimes not even the same country. But would you say we've maintained that all along, like in that connection, or how would you characterize or was it just reconnecting?
No, I think it's, for me, or it appeared to be. There's some blurs in my life, but it always appeared to be consistent, because one of the cool things that I've always thought that God did was the fact that you were in high school in Pensacola, and then when my sister passed, I moved to Pensacola. And so even when you were I think that time you were in Africa, when you came back through, I was going to start school, and you met me somewhere to give me a bag. Like, again, a tangible thing that I could use.
Oh, that's right.
Was it a computer bag I think it was a computer bag, because I was getting a computer and I was doing some online school at the time. And so throughout the last 20 years, I mean, I don't think there was ever a period where it was like we weren't connected. But we weren't necessarily like talking every week or even every month sometimes, but we were still always, I knew that I could, count on you. There was never like, oh, Charlene walked away from me. I think we got close after about 10 years, but you stayed. You had to put in a lot of work.
Well, okay, so that's a key, right? Consistency, right? Consistency. I know you helped me build those muscles, right? So a couple of other memories about those first 3 years. One is I quit my job at UPS at some point and started a company with some friends. And I remember being on the phone with you and hearing that you needed something. Either it was money for something, you needed money for electricity, some need. And I had more money at that point than I had literally for many years, because after that I went on the mission field and and so until I came back and had another job. And so I had the physical means to meet your need. And I felt like I was supposed to just pray with you, and I did. And you were very resourceful. There's something I always appreciate about you. You knew how to ask. You weren't afraid to ask or to find help at churches or things like that at the time. But I remember getting off the phone with you and talking to my friend Christy and just crying and crying and crying, because I wanted so badly to help, but I felt like the Lord was like, just point her to me so that she doesn't rely on you, but she relies on me. Mm. Did you feel like I wasn't helping you during that time when I would say, hey, let's pray about it and whatever? Or did you ever think, oh, Charlene, what do you remember about the time when you needed more than you did later on?
I think back then I still had this very high opinion of you. I put you on this pedestal. So I don't think there was ever a concern on my end for your intent. Like you intended to not help me. Like there was something like you were like I have the finances and I just don't want to. And so I don't think that even crossed my mind at all. But, it's interesting though that you bring that up, because that's the thing. I think ultimately, not that just that one instance, but even with my family, like to stop enabling and to actually, and that's hard sometimes because it challenges our trust in the Lord, right? Like, do I trust God's going to take care of you, or do I need to fix this for you? And once, my family stopped trying to fix it, which just made it worse. And they're amazing and I love them and they were always trying to help, but I would always get helped enough just to get by. And that wasn't what God had. And so it took people doing exactly what you did and listen. Sometimes we are supposed to do the tangible thing to help the need. And sometimes the most helpful thing that we can do is point them to Jesus and not get in the way.
Yeah. And I think that for me, the key was learning to hear the difference with God, because I am, by nature, I am a caregiver. People that talk about Enneagram, I think I am either like, I don't know, I'm a something with a 2 wing or a 2, whatever, which is a caregiver personality. I'm a people pleaser naturally. And so I was trying to learn how to ask God and then hear. And I did not expect to ever hear God say, no, don't help. Like that sounded like something God wouldn't say. So I would go to my friend and I would say, hey, I'm hearing this. And she's like, well, then I think that's what you need to do. And I'm like, but that sounds mean. Of course, I didn't tell you. I was smart enough to not say, hey, I have the money. I'm just not going to give it to you. That would be dumb. I just was like, cruel. Hey, let's pray. Let's pray about that.
If you want to come turn the light on.
But what I remember too, I have electricity. You want to come?
You can come use my electricity.
One of the things I remember about that was
she didn't do that.
Nanny boo boo. Yes. I have money.
Like I turn it off. I can turn it on.
But God met your need pretty fast. Like I remember him meeting your need, not through me. So it wasn't that the need that you went without electricity for a super long period of time, especially in Texas in the summer. If it was,
I don't think I even did
I just remember. I remember that it was met through another means. Say it again.
I don't think I went without. I don't remember a time where it was actually shut off. I don't remember when my electricity was ever actually shut off. I think there was just because of my behaviors, my choices, and limited resources at the time. It was always a fear. Like there was not money because I had one source of income. I had Social Security, and then later I got jobs and stuff. But in that season, there was no extra. There was student loan money. I don't recommend. Don't do that, guys. Don't live off student loan money. It's a poor decision. But I didn't, that helped me. Like it helped me to grow trust in God because I wasn't just saying, oh, Charlene can do it for me. I was seeing, like, even with the tithing thing, I was seeing, okay, wait, God actually did it. And there was probably a long period of time where my beliefs were interwoven and that kind of attached you to God. Like, was it Charlene? Was it the Lord?
Yeah. And I was learning that God doesn't need me. That he meets needs. He allows me to be a part of things sometimes, but he doesn't need me, which was super important before I became a missionary. Because obviously, it's that whole kind of martyr syndrome that can happen pretty easily. And you go and you think, oh, you need me to do this, or, God, I'm going to help so-and-so. And everything becomes a project and not a relationship. And it was, I just really feel like I was growing up and learning and realizing, look, this friendship that I have with Julie's a real person with real needs, with real things, not just, a project, not something over here. I used to say, you were the first person that I knew personally and friendly that had lived to a totally different life than I had. Where you can go and be a part of, here I help out sometimes with Nashville Cares and things like that. And so helping out in Nashville, and you can go and you feed the homeless or do different things with people or go help and take food, but you don't get to know people. Usually you have maybe one conversation, but I had never really gotten to know somebody. And now this is my friend who is hilarious and smart and funny and, a strong woman able to make good choices.
Good choices. I was like, you liar.
Do you remember me saying that? Do you remember me saying that?
I do. I remember you saying that, and I remember thinking Christians are not supposed to, I think I actually told you Christians are not supposed to lie. Like, clearly I don't make good choices.
It's funny, I hope that this podcast becomes something where I can, bring in other people that have mentored me. But at the time, that phrase actually came from somebody telling me all the time, Charlene, you're a strong woman able to make good choices. My mentor of over 20 years, Catherine, she would say that to me all the time. And I knew that sometimes I wasn't making good choices and I didn't feel very strong. But she constantly was feeding me, Charlene, you're a strong woman able to make good choices. And she knew some of the bad choices that I was making or had made. And so I was like, you know what? That is true. That's true. So I remember saying to you, and I've said it to a lot of young women in my life, you are a strong woman able to make good choices. You told me later, it was, later, I think during the Pensacola time, that I must have said that to you again on the phone. Because we would talk, you're right. Like, I think it's funny. We're going to talk a little bit about like these different moments where we connected in different cities. But I remember talking to you and saying to you on the phone, you're telling me some things that you're happening in your life and some struggles. And I didn't have the answer. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a lot of answers. I wasn't yet a professional coach, so I didn't know how to ask you good questions probably. But I do remember being able to say, well, Julie, you're a strong woman able to make good choices. And you've told me your opinion of that sometimes. I mean, not just Christians shouldn't lie, but do you remember me saying that to you at a time very specifically when you were not making good choices?
I do. Well, I think that was like right before I left Florida and got freedom from all this. But I was at the time, I think the time I got mad at you, or not mad, wasn't mad at you. I was mad at myself. But it wasn't when you said I was a strong woman able to make good choices. It was a time when you actually were proud of me and thinking, I think so you kind of said it in a context like, see, look, you are a strong woman able to make good choices, because I sounded so put together and so sure of myself and everything was clear. And what you didn't know is how much, Ritalin I was, abusing, or any other kind of speed I could get my hands on, because I was so cloudy all the time from the medication the doctors gave me, that kind of really brought me to kind of regular. But I knew what I was doing and you didn't. And I was felt so defeated because you were so proud. And I was like, oh, this is horrible, because you didn't know. And there's so much shame attached to it, but you did not from you, but just from the choices I was making, and then feeling kind of defeated, like,
Right.
this is what I have to do in order to get that kind of affirmation. Because I didn't realize the life I have now existed.
Wow. So it wasn't even real at that point. So what that did at that moment was, oh, for her to be proud of me, I have to have this like duplicitous life. Like it has to look like I'm all put together, but really the only reason I'm all put together is because I'm doing this over here. Is that what you're saying?
That's accurate.
How did you get from, and we're going to
Sure.
bounce back and forth, but how did you get from there to actually making good choice, I guess, or out of the shame? Like what happened? It could have gone a lot of directions from there.
So I think, because that was
I don't even know.
You must have been getting tired, because I was probably almost 10 years into trying to help me and kind of seeing like seasons of fruit, right? It wasn't just all horrible. I mean, I went to University of North Texas. I got into a lot of school. Right. I even went to Germany and stuff, but there were just moments, or, even a few months or a year at times. And so what changed, I think, honestly, it came down to people stopped helping me. I had graduated University of West Florida, not by the skin of my teeth, I guess, what they say. And I got a job, but Pensacola.
What year was that? What year did you graduate?
2012. So 9 years, I guess.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
And so I graduated, and Pensacola is a wonderful beach. It is not a great place for finding employment if you're not there for the tourist or for the military. And so, I'm sorry, Pensacola, but that's a true statement. And so I went, and at the time, and we'll have to touch on this later, but ironically, at the time, I was with he was my now husband, And we had broken up, and I had a job, and I was going to be what was it? Oh, a physical therapist, traveling physical therapist. I was being a recruiter. It was going to be wonderful. I think it paid like $8-9 an hour plus commission, which I clearly was going to make commission. I did not. I did not make any commission, because if you just have panic attacks all the time, your dialer and your charm ability goes way down. So that didn't work out. And so I moved to Houston, and I took a job there. It was kind of a pyramid scheme, but I didn't know that at the time. And I moved to Houston. And one of the biggest things I did through that period, I had been like trying. I was watching a lot of, sermons and reading my Bible and reading books. And I was really trying, but I wasn't ever acting on it. I just was trying a little bit until something would shake me, and then I'd go back to my old life. But then when I was in Houston, it was the worst. But the first decision I made, because my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, he drove me and my U-Haul. I'm going over the story. When I went back to Houston, Florida to get my stuff, because I was coming to Houston, we got back together. He drove my U-Haul to Houston, and then he took a bus back. And the goal was that he was going to come back and be with me, and we were going to have this life together, and we were both going to do better. Like that was, we cared about each other deeply, and we were going to help each other do better. He didn't even know I had an addiction problem. I hid it from him completely at the time. Probably not well. He probably knew something was wrong. And so one of the things I knew God told me was, y'all can't heal each other. You can't do this. This is not gonna, be fruitful for you. And so the first obedient thing I did was tell him he couldn't come. And that was the hardest thing I'd ever did, because in my mind, I loved him with my understanding of love, and telling someone that they can't be with you was like the ultimate rejection in my mind. And so historically, I would stay with people just because I didn't want to reject them. But I knew this came from the Lord. So I said, okay, I'm going to do it. And I told him he couldn't come. And I'd lived in Houston for about 6 months. It was a horrible season. I did not live the way the Lord wanted me to at all, minus that one thing. And then I didn't maintain my job. I was about to get evicted because I couldn't pay for it. And I'm bargaining with the Lord. I'm like, hey, God, if you would just get me somewhere I can really afford. Because I would always rent places I couldn't actually afford, because the ones I could afford were kind of scary. But I was like, I'll go wherever I can on this limited amount of money.
Is this when I remember talking to you when you were in Houston and you hadn't eaten in a few days? Do you remember that?
Yeah, you ordered me a pizza.
They didn't have Uber Eats back then.
No, we just ordered me a pizza. Yeah.
I sent you a pizza and something to drink, and then I said, call me back when you've eaten.
Yeah.
Because I could tell you were hungry for, like, it had been several days. And then we talked. I just remember that one conversation. I don't remember much about it. I just remember praying for you and, like, telling you were a strong woman, able to make good choices.
I think you stopped believing it a little bit at that point.
Oh my goodness, what is going to happen? I didn't stop believing it. I think that I was, I remember, well, two things when you were in Houston. Another thing I remember about you being in Houston before you left Houston was your mom called me. And I had never talked to your mom before. That was the first time that she was worried about you. I mean, she'd worried about you many times, but enough to contact me to say what, and I was like, I have no idea. Like, and I remember we had some sort of conversation where I challenged you, and I was a little, and that might've been that same conversation, that same pizza conversation. I don't remember, but I was a little probably frustrated. Like, come on, like, do something, or something. And you, I don't remember what your response was, but here's what I remember. I remember that night I didn't sleep well. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I heard the Lord say very clearly, it is not your job to correct Julie. It's your job to remind her of who she is. And I repented in prayer that morning and just was like, okay. So whatever I had said, I was very corrective, and where I don't think I had really been like that before. And so that was where my frustration, like the end of it. So it wasn't that I didn't believe, because I trusted God. I trusted God in you. I knew that he had a plan for your life, a plan to prosper you, a plan to give you a hope in the future. So I really believed that. What I what I didn't know is how you're going to get there. Like, I was just like, because I didn't know how I'm going to get there, literally. So, and then things changed, and it wasn't because I did anything. Like, I probably did the wrong thing. Do you remember being frustrated with you, or that conversation, or how you felt about that?
Kind of. It's a little bit of a hazy time because it was like the bottom of the barrel for me at that point in my life. And so I wasn't as present of what was really happening. So I do remember the frustration. I remember that. And I remember my mom telling me, I was like, Mom, what's plan B? Like, what do we do? And she was like, I don't have a plan A, so I'm not sure. And then I was looking for you I wanted to get somewhere. I remember I was gonna go to like a treatment center or something where I could clean up and get sober and make
that's
good choices.
Right. We looked for all sorts of treatment centers.
Yeah. Because it was just, I wanted to hide somewhere, basically.
I reached out to people and we couldn't find any place. You were too old, I remember, for Mercy, and you were so upset about that.
Yes,
they increased the age later.
Good job, Mercy. No, y'all do wonderful things, and that wasn't my time.
Good job. So we were I was trying to help, but was frustrated. You were looking for a place to get cleaned up, and you couldn't find it. And then what happened?
So then I had to leave my apartment, and because I was going to get evicted, so I needed to get out. And I went to my brother's house, and there was just no plan. And my brother... I was horrible, so I was not a great person to have as a house guest at the time. And my brother was just like, hey, we can't do this. And I was so defeated because I thought my whole family had just abandoned me, and that there was because that was the way that I always got healed. Like, someone comes in to rescue you, a person will help you, and that's how it's going to be okay. And I just remember the Lord telling me, you've got to just believe what I say is true, and then I'm going to take care of you, and you have to go. And I was like, okay. So I was like, there was really kind of no other choice, but I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go all in. So I left Houston August 19th, 2013. I don't know if you're familiar with how far Houston is from Dallas, but it's definitely not 12 hours, which is how long my drive took. And at that point, I, went off of all my medication. I'd stopped using drugs. I think I'd kept an anxiety medication. I still had some of it. But interesting enough, I tried to fill it right before I left Houston, and they were out. And so I didn't get it filled, and I just drove to my grandmother's house, who I didn't know very well because I had no relationship. I had no consistency of being healthy enough to have relationships. But I just showed up at her house at 4 a.m. She made me a sandwich, and I just kind of landed there for a minute. And at that point, it really was just doing all the things kind of that I learned through Encounter, and we can probably talk on that some, and just what the Lord asked you to do, right? Not even just trying to be a good person or to make it all happen on my own, but really believing the Lord cares about me. He's made my entire life. He's not surprised by any of my decisions, any of my past sin, and I can actually live the way that He says I can. And something just switched in that moment, and I just believed it. And like I said, I quit all my medication and everything. And then when it was time, I think like a week later, I tried to go, and I was like, oh, I'll fill my anxiety medication in Dallas, because I had the actual prescription from the doctor. And they were like, no, unfortunately, we're not filling prescriptions for this because there's been such an instance of fake prescriptions out of Houston. So you'll have to go to Houston if you want it filled. And in that moment, I was like, okay, I can drive back to Houston. I've done way crazier things to find drugs of some sort. And so, but I was like, no, I'm just not going to do it. I'm not. And I just started being intentional and practicing. Okay, the Lord says I have to forgive people. I'm going to forgive them. Practicing gratitude. If I'm going to, instead of having a panic attack, I'm just going to overwhelm my brain. Not that I knew this at the time, with just Thanksgiving, and just really living how the Bible teaches us. And that's what the change was. And since that day, and not that I don't ever have an anxious feeling or feel sad about things, but from that day, I've never had panic attack. I've never, that's just not been something that I've even struggled with. And it's really hard now to even think back, because I know I was this person that we're talking about. I fully know that, but I can't remember it in my memories. It's like a story told about someone else.
Wow. What another great episode. It really jumped out to me this time, even though I loved hearing all about Julie's story. she's funny, isn't she? I just love hearing her. But what really jumped out to me was the tension when I described how hard it was to know when to help and solve her problem, or when to wait and like encourage her to go to God and to solve it herself. And then she tells me how pivotal that was in her life. In real time, that was one of the hardest things I think I've ever done. That tension. Now that I teach about polarities, I'm realizing that's what that is. This idea of a tension to manage versus a problem to solve. Recognizing the difference is key. It's not either or, it's yes and, oftentimes. We like one side over the other. Like, I really like solving people's problems. It's harder to wait and to watch the other side, but it's a tension that I manage. What do you have? Do you have polarities in your life, in your relationships that you can identify that you're like, oh my goodness, that is exactly what that is, Charlene. That is a polarity. Tell me about it. Comment, put it in YouTube, contact me on social media. All of my information is right there in the show notes or in the description. While you're there, please like, subscribe, review, share, get this out to more people. We just want to encourage more people to listen and to mentor. In our next episode, we're going to talk more about something called inner healing and how that impacted Julie's life. She describes a whole thing called Encounter that our church did. And just this idea of incremental growth, like little bit of fruit and then maybe a fallback. And what does that look like? So you won't want to miss it. Remember that he who began a good work in you will complete it. He'll finish it to the day of completion. Thank you and have a great day. This has been The Accidental Mentor, and my name is Charlene Garrett.